Welcome to Shadowed Tales Archive. Tonight, we invite you to descend into darkness with a chilling anthology of horror stories, each one inspired by true events. This is episode 26. Let the nightmare begin. The Whispering Tunnel. This is such a stupid idea. Why are we even doing this? Those are the thoughts that arose in my mind on that chilly, eerie evening. Sitting in the passenger seat of the dimly lit car, which belonged to my best friend, Damon, I peered out the window and glanced up at the beautiful, yet ominous night sky. The moon was huge and luminous. I looked at my watch. It was just about midnight, a time when most normal people would already be in bed. I glanced over at Damon, who was gleefully driving to our destination, seemingly unaware of how stupid this whole thing was. "Why are we doing this, Damon? You know nothing's gonna happen," I said, slightly annoyed at the entire situation. Damon looked at me with aggravation. "You agreed to come, so stop being a little bitch and try to have some fun," he snapped. After about 5 more minutes of driving, Damon stopped the car abruptly. "Here we are," he proclaimed with genuine excitement. He then turned to me and corrected himself. "Well, almost. We have to do a little walking." I followed Damon as we walked down a steep grassy hill and ended up in the woods. Pitch black. "I can't see a fucking thing," I exclaimed. "Don't worry, dude. I brought a flashlight." He pulled a small flashlight out of his jeans pocket. "Of course," I muttered under my breath. We continued through the woods for what seemed like an hour. Finally, we arrived in front of a vast, deep tunnel. I looked at Damon. "What the hell is this thing?" "The Whispering Tunnel. Here we are. Let's go," Damon said, dangerously eager to go inside the death trap. I stopped him. Whoa. We're not going in there, are we? We're gonna kill ourselves. What if the flashlight dies? What if there's someone else in there? What if he stopped being such a pussy and just walked in?" My friend interrupted in a half-joking tone. "Come on, let's go." I reluctantly followed him into the tunnel. It was cold, dark, and damp. Insects were everywhere, not to mention all the dead rats, mice, and of course, the occasional decaying cat. There were all sorts of graffiti covering the walls. I instantly felt something very strange throughout my body. It felt as if a bubble of negative energy was trying to push itself into me. I was overwhelmed with a sense of dread. However, I remembered how damn excited Damon was to be here, so I kept my mouth shut and continued to follow behind him. As we reached the middle of the tunnel, Damon pulled out his camera and decided to take a few pictures. For the next couple of minutes, all I heard was the loud snap of Damon's camera, paired with a flash that nearly blinded me. Suddenly, I felt a small hand on my shoulder. I quickly turned around, but of course, nobody was behind me. I shrugged it off and kept walking. Maybe it was a bug, I thought, in an attempt to calm my nerves. The tunnel became colder and darker the further we walked. "How long is this tunnel?" I asked Damon. He turned to me and smirked. "Would you relax? We'll turn back in a minute." I noticed that he was beginning to feel a bit nervous. "You're right, though. We have been walking for a while. Let's turn around." We began to walk back to the entrance. I couldn't wait to get out. As we were walking, I abruptly heard something that sounded like a young girl's laughter. Then I felt it again. The hand on my shoulder. The same small, childlike hand. This time, it was more assertive, like something was really trying to get my attention. Again, I tried to tell myself that it was probably just a bug or something. I just wanted to get the hell out of this place. Finally, after what seemed like hours, we reached the entrance and quickly walked outside. We hurried through the woods and up the hill, glancing over our shoulders every so often to make sure nothing was following us. At last, we arrived at Damon's car. I wasted no time opening the passenger door and hopping in. Damon then got inside after me and started the car. He pulled his camera out of his backpack. "All right, let's see what we got," he said with a radiant grin. The two of us looked carefully at every picture. Nothing, just a bunch of concrete, dirt, and spiders. Then, we came across a picture of me standing in front of Damon. We both looked closely and gasped. There was a small, childlike hand, gently resting on my shoulder. I stared at the image, my breath caught in my throat. It wasn't just a smudge or blur that could be explained away. No trick of the light or photographic glitch. It was unmistakably a hand. Small, pale, delicate fingers curling softly over my shoulder. Damon leaned closer to the camera screen, his expression shifting from fascination to unease. "Dude, that wasn't there before," he said quietly. "No shit, it wasn't." I snapped back, still trying to process what I was seeing. There was no one behind me. "You were in front the whole time." He nodded, swallowing hard. "I know. I didn't see anyone either. But look at the angle. This thing is behind you. It's not part of your shadow or mine." I zoomed in on the picture. The fingers looked almost translucent, yet solid enough to cast the faintest shadow on my jacket. I could see the delicate curve of nails, the knuckles. It wasn't just an impression. It was a real hand, a child's hand. I sat back in the seat, the image burning into my mind. I suddenly felt cold, not from the weather, but from something deeper, something that had crawled under my skin and settled in my bones. Damon didn't say anything else for a while. He just kept flipping through the pictures, his brows furrowed, his mouth set in a tight line. Then he froze again. "Eli," he whispered, "look at this." He held the camera toward me, and I leaned in. It was a picture of the tunnel wall, covered in graffiti, most of it just spray-painted nonsense or tags. But this one was different. Someone had written words in red, not spray paint. This looked more like smear blood. The message was in jagged, hurried handwriting. It said, "She never left." I looked up at Damon, my voice barely audible. "What the hell is this place?" He didn't answer. For once, Damon had nothing clever to say. We drove in silence for the next 20 minutes, each of us lost in our own thoughts. The air in the car felt heavier than usual, like we brought something back with us. Finally, Damon pulled into a gas station. "I need to piss," he muttered. I stayed in the car while he went inside. The convenience store was brightly lit, a sharp contrast to the tunnel and woods we'd just come from. It almost felt fake, like stepping into a movie set. I glanced at the camera, still sitting on the dashboard. The image of the hand was still up on the screen. I tried to tell myself it had to be fake, a trick of light, maybe some weird reflection. But I couldn't shake the feeling I'd had in that tunnel. That touch, that presence. A few minutes later, Damon came back with a soda in one hand and a strange look on his face. The cashier asked me where we'd been. He said as he climbed back in, said I looked like I'd seen a ghost. I gave a half laugh. Maybe we did. He didn't laugh. Instead, he said, "She said she grew up around here, knows the stories." She called it the Whispering Tunnel. Said people go in and come out different. Different how? I asked. Damon shrugged. Didn't say. Just told me to be careful what I bring back. We didn't talk much after that. He dropped me off at my house. And for once, he didn't make a joke or give me shit for being scared. He just said, "Text me if anything weird happens." I nodded. "Same to you." That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt it again. That small, cold hand on my shoulder. Once I sat bolt upright in bed. Sure, I'd heard the sound of a girl's laughter. Faint, echoing, like it was coming from inside the walls. I got up and checked the house, room by room. Everything was locked, nothing out of place. But I couldn't shake the sense of being watched. The next day, I tried to go about things as normal. School, homework, video games. But everything felt off. Colors looked duller. Sounds seemed muffled. Even food tasted different. I texted Damon. "Eli, hey, you feeling weird today too?" He didn't reply. Hours passed. Nothing. Finally, around 10 p.m., I got a response. "Damon, can't talk. Things are happening. Come over." I grabbed my keys and jacket and drove straight to his place. When I got there, the lights were off. The house looked deserted, but his car was in the driveway. I rang the bell. No answer. I knocked. Still nothing. Then I heard it. From inside the house. The same laughter. That high-pitched giggle that didn't belong to either of us. The door creaked open by itself. I stepped inside. The door creaked open by itself. I stepped inside. "Damon," I called out into the darkness. The air inside was still, unnaturally still. There was no sound of a TV, no creaking floorboards, just silence. I took a few cautious steps in, letting the door close behind me. "Damon, are you here?" I said again, louder. Still nothing. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, casting long shadows on the walls. I walked through the hallway slowly, my footsteps sounding too loud in the quiet house. Something felt wrong. The air smelled different, like wet earth and metal, like the tunnel. I reached the living room. Empty, but the coffee table was overturned, and there were deep scratch marks on the hardwood floor, for long grooves, as if someone had been dragged. My pulse quickened. I moved toward the hallway that led to Damon's room. "Damon," I said again, voice trembling slightly. Then I heard something, a whisper, too quiet to make out, but definitely a voice. It came from the bedroom. I reached for the door and slowly pushed it open. The room was dark, except for the glow of the computer screen. On it, I could see Damon's desktop. A folder was open, filled with images. I stepped closer. The room smelled like mildew and something else. Something sour. The chair was empty. I moved the mouse to wake the screen. More pictures from the tunnel, but some were new. Ones I hadn't seen before. Ones we hadn't taken. There were images of Damon sleeping. Close-ups of his face. Pictures taken from just inches away. From the edge of the bed. My stomach dropped. Then a folder in the corner of the screen caught my eye. It was labeled She. I clicked it. Inside were dozens of audio files, labeled by date and time. I played the first one. At first, just static. Then, faint whispering. A girl's voice. Laughing. Crying. Singing. Then, Eli. I jumped back from the computer. That wasn't possible. That was my name. I clicked the next one. Damon. The voice was soft, almost sweet. But beneath it, there was something else. Something cold. Then came another voice. Damon's. Pleading. Stop, please stop. Click. The file ended. I backed away, heart pounding. I had to get out. As I turned to leave the room, I saw it. The closet door was open, just a crack. From the shadows. Two small, pale fingers curled around the edge. I froze. Then the door creaked open slowly, and I saw her. A little girl, or something that looked like one. She was wearing a white dress, dirty and torn. Her hair was long, matted, hanging over her face. But I could see her eyes. Black, bottomless. She didn't move, just stood there, watching me. I couldn't move. Then she smiled. Not a child's smile. A cruel, twisted grin that stretched too wide. I turned and ran. Through the hallway. Down the stairs. Out the door. I didn't stop until I was in my car with the doors locked and engine running. I drove. I didn't care where. Just away. I called Damon as I drove. No answer. I tried again. Voicemail. Damon, I saw her. I said, barely breathing. She's real. She's in your house. Get out if you can. Call me. Please. I hung up. That night, I didn't go home. I parked in a supermarket lot and stayed there till sunrise, watching the shadows move across the dashboard. The next morning, I drove to Damon's house again. Police were there. An ambulance. Neighbors standing around. One of them recognized me. "You his friend?" a woman asked. "Something terrible happened last night." I didn't answer. A detective approached me, asked if I'd seen Damon recently. I lied, said I hadn't. I wasn't ready to explain what I'd seen. He nodded, gave me his card, said they'd be in touch. That afternoon, I got a text from a blocked number. "Did you tell them?" I didn't reply. A few minutes later, "She knows." I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my room with all the lights on, phone in one hand, a baseball bat in the other. Every creak of the house made me jump. I kept checking my phone. No more texts. No calls. Nothing from Damon. Nothing from the police. By morning, I was exhausted but too afraid to close my eyes. I went online, searching for anything I could find about the tunnel. Urban legends, local forums, ghost hunter blogs. Anything. It didn't take long. There are dozens of posts, some dating back over a decade. They all mention the same place, the tunnel in the woods. People called it by different names. The Devil's Pathway, the Crying Tunnel, the Whispering Girl. The stories varied, but one thing was always the same. A little girl, white dress, dark hair, eyes like empty holes. And once you saw her, she didn't forget you. One post caught my attention more than the others. It was from a user named Tunnel Witness 01, dated 2 years ago. The title read, "She's real. Don't go looking for her." I clicked it. The post was long, rambling, but the details were eerily familiar. The user described going into the tunnel with a friend, seeing the graffiti, hearing the laughter, feeling the hand. They saw her, too, the girl. She followed them, appeared in photos, whispered their names, showed up at night. Their friend disappeared. And then the last line chilled me to the core. "If you've seen her, you're next." I leaned back in my chair, heart racing. This wasn't just a one-time event. This had happened before, and it would happen again. I needed answers. I needed help. So I posted, on the same forum. "Saw her. Need to talk. Urgent. DM me." Within an hour, I got a reply. A private message from Tunnel Witness 01. TW01. "You really saw her?" Eli. "Yes. 2 nights ago. She touched me. My friend's gone." TW01. "It's not just the tunnel. Once she marks you, it spreads. She can come anywhere now, even through mirrors, photos, recordings." Eli. "What does she want?" TW01. "To be remembered, to be seen. But mostly, she wants you to join her." I stared at the screen, the cursor blinking. No new messages. I typed again. "Eli, how do I stop her?" No reply. Minutes passed. An hour. Nothing. Then finally, TW01. "You don't." I logged off. That night, I covered every mirror in my house. Unplugged my TV, my laptop, my phone, anything with a reflection. But around 2 a.m., I heard it. Soft humming. A lullaby, coming from the hallway. I grabbed the bat and crept to the door. Opened it slowly. The hallway was empty. But the sound, it was still there, coming from the bathroom. The only mirror I forgot. I stepped inside. The light flickered. And in the mirror, she was there, standing behind me. I turned. Nothing. But in the reflection, she didn't move. She just stood there, watching, smiling. I slammed the door shut, broke the mirror with a bat. Glass shattered across the floor. The humming stopped, but I knew it wasn't over. It was never going to be over. The next day, I drove back to the tunnel. I had to see it again. I had to know if she was still there. When I arrived, the place looked different, smaller, darker, like it was rotting from the inside. I stepped inside, the cold wrapping around me instantly. Every step echoed. The walls seemed to breathe. The graffiti was still there, but some of it had changed. New messages, written in what looked like dried blood. "Eli, she knows you. You belong to her now." I turned back, started to run, but the exit, it was gone, vanished. Just more tunnel. Endless darkness stretching in every direction. I screamed. No echo, just silence. Then, a giggle, high-pitched, close. I turned and saw her, closer than ever, an inch from my face. Her eyes swallowed everything. She opened her mouth, and I fell into darkness. I don't remember hitting the ground. I don't even remember falling. 1 second, I was standing in front of her. The next, darkness. No sound, no feeling, just void. Then, slowly things came back. A ringing in my ears. The feeling of damp stone beneath my palms. The cold. Always the cold. I opened my eyes. I was still in the tunnel. But deeper now. Far deeper than I thought it went. The walls were different. No more graffiti. Just stone. Ancient, cracked, pulsing faintly with a reddish hue. The air was heavy. Every breath felt like it filled me with something wrong. I stood up, my body aching, and turned in a slow circle. No end in sight. No entrance. No exit. Just tunnel. And then, footsteps. Not mine. Light, quick, skipping steps. Like a child, I pressed my back to the wall and held my breath. The sound got closer and closer until it stopped right in front of me, but there was no one there, just empty space. Then the whisper came, right next to my ear. "Found you." I ran down the tunnel. No plan, no direction, just away. But the steps followed, always behind me, sometimes beside me, sometimes ahead. I turned corners that shouldn't exist, past doorways that vanished as soon as I looked back. I screamed. Nothing came out. I cried. She laughed. At some point, I collapsed. Couldn't run anymore. I lay there, shaking, waiting for her to come. But she didn't. Instead, I heard another voice. Faint. Familiar. Eli. It was Damon. I opened my eyes. He was standing over me. Not her. Him. He looked terrible. Pale. Eyes sunken. Clothes torn. But it was him. Damon. I croaked. He nodded. Help me sit up. She lets me walk sometimes, he said. What is this place? She calls it home. It's where she brings us. The marked ones. I stared at him. You knew. He looked away. I didn't want to. But after the first time, after the photo, I felt her. Everywhere. Couldn't sleep. Couldn't eat. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. She made me draw this, he whispered. I unfolded it. A child's drawing. Stick figures. A tunnel. A girl in a white dress. Red scribbles where the eyes should be. I see it every night, he said. She's showing me what comes next. What comes next? I asked, but he didn't answer. His eyes rolled back. He collapsed. I rushed to him, shaking his shoulders. Damon. No response. Then a sound behind me. Breathing. I turned. She was there, closer than ever. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw something else in them. Sadness. Loneliness. Then fury. She opened her mouth, and the world exploded in white. I woke up in my own bed. Sunlight poured through the window. Birds chirped outside. Everything looked normal, but I knew it wasn't. I sat up, my head pounding. The tunnel. Damon. The girl. Had it been a dream? I checked my phone. Dozens of missed calls. Texts. From my mom. Friends. The police. All asking the same question. Where are you? I've been missing for 3 days. No one could find me. They'd searched the woods. The tunnel. Everywhere. But I had vanished. And now, I was back. Just like that. No memory of how. I went to the mirror. My reflection looked different. Tired. Pale. But something else. I leaned in closer. And there, on my shoulder, a faint red mark. Shaped like a hand. Small. Childlike. I touched it. It burned. That night, I dreamed of her again. The tunnel. The laughter. The voice whispering my name. I saw Damon. Still trapped. Still fading. He looked at me and said, She's not done. I jolted awake. Couldn't breathe. My room felt smaller. Walls closing in. And in the corner, just for a second, I saw her. Watching. Smiling. Gone. I knew what I had to do. I couldn't run. I couldn't hide. I had to face her. Again. I returned to the tunnel one final time. This time I brought supplies. Flashlights. Rope. Camera. Salt. I didn't even know if salt would help. But the forums had mentioned it. Used in circles, lines, barriers. It couldn't hurt. I waited until midnight. The moon was full again. The same way it was that first night. I parked the car, grabbed my gear, and walked toward the woods. Every branch seemed to creak. Every gust of wind felt colder than it should have. But I kept going, down the hill, through the trees, to the mouth of the tunnel. It was waiting, just like before. Dark, silent, hungry. I took a deep breath, stepped inside. The air changed instantly. Thicker, wet. The sounds of the outside world disappeared. All I could hear was my own breathing and the soft drip of water from the ceiling. I walked forward, past the graffiti, past the dead rats, deeper than I'd ever gone. I stopped at the point where I'd seen her the first time, pulled out the salt, poured it in a wide circle around me. I sat down, turned on the camera, and spoke. My name is Eli. If you're seeing this, I probably didn't make it out. I came here to find answers. About her, about Damon, about everything. And if I can't stop her, maybe someone else can. I paused. I know she was real. She touched me. She marked me. And I think she wants something. A sound echoed in the distance. Footsteps. I stood, holding the flashlight steady. Come on, I whispered. Show yourself. Silence. Then, the laughter. That same haunting giggle. It came from every direction. I gripped the bat tighter. You don't scare me anymore, I said. The air grew colder. I could see my breath now. A thick fog. And then, she appeared, standing just outside the circle, watching. Her dress was soaked, dripping. Her hair clung to her face. Her eyes burned like coals. I didn't move. Neither did she. Then she stepped forward. The salt crackled. She hissed. Smoke rose from her foot. She backed away. It worked. For now. I pulled out the drawing Damon had given me. Held it up. This what you want? I asked. Is this you? She tilted her head. For the first time, she spoke. Yes. Her voice was wind and static and ice. 1,000 whispers layered together. Who are you? I asked. She didn't answer. Just stared. What do you want? Silence. Then she stepped closer, right to the edge of the circle, and whispered, Remember me. Remember me. The words hung in the air like smoke. They weren't a request. They were a command. She stared at me, those black eyes filled with something ancient. Older than the tunnel. Older than me. Older than death. What's your name? I asked, my voice shaking. But she didn't answer. Instead, she stepped to the edge of the salt circle again, leaned forward, and placed a single finger on the barrier. A sharp hiss. A burst of steam. She didn't flinch. She pushed harder. The salt began to scatter. No, I whispered, scrambling to reinforce the line. I poured more from the bag, but it was too late. She broke through. Suddenly, the circle didn't matter. She was inside, with me. I backed away, tripped, fell. She stepped closer, closer. I raised the bat, swinging blindly. It passed right through her. She didn't even blink. I crawled backward until I hit the tunnel wall. No way out. She stood over me, face inches from mine. Then, she showed me, not with words, not with images. She filled my mind with memories. But they weren't mine. A small house, fire, screaming, being locked in, no one coming to help. A girl, alone, burning, left to die, forgotten. And in that moment, I understood. She wasn't just angry. She was grief. She was pain. She was what happens when the forgotten cry long enough into the dark. And someone finally listens. I looked at her, really looked. I'm sorry, I whispered. She blinked. The first human gesture I'd seen. I didn't know. She stepped back. Her shape flickered, faded. For a second. Just one. She looked like a normal girl. Tears on her face. Then she was gone. The tunnel was empty. I sat there for hours. Not moving. Not breathing. Just existing. Trying to understand what had happened. When I finally stood, the salt was gone. So was the bag. So was the camera. But I still had the drawing, crinkled in my pocket. I walked out of the tunnel as the sun was rising. Birds were chirping. The world kept turning. But I was different. I had remembered her. And that was all she ever wanted. The Demon of Dusk. It has many names. The Scandinavians call it the mare. The Turkish call it karabasan. From where I come from, we call it the Demon of Dusk. However, I suppose you had probably heard of it under the name the sleep paralysis. First, let me define it. Sleep paralysis is a phenomenon in which a person, either falling asleep or awakening, temporarily experiences an inability to move, speak, or react. It is a transitional state between wakefulness and sleep characterized by complete muscle atonia, muscle weakness. It is often accompanied by terrifying hallucinations, such as an intruder in the room, to which one is unable to react due to paralysis, and physical experiences, such as strong current running through the upper body. One theory is that it results from disrupted REM sleep, which normally induces complete muscle atonia to prevent the sleeper from acting out his or her dreams. Sleep paralysis has been linked to disorders such as narcolepsy, migraines, anxiety disorders, and obstructive sleep apnea. However, it can also occur in isolation. Hallucinations? Is that what those who do not believe in paranormality call an unexplainable phenomenon or its effects? There are many people who rely on science to clarify all phenomenons. Yet there are mysteries that even science seems to fall in its shades. According to science, you can experience a certain hallucination between the phase of sleep and wakefulness. Still, just how can we all have the same hallucination? How can we all witness the exact same terror? To me, this is an insult to all of those who have faced it. The Demon of Dusk, that is, and that is how I will always refer to it. Not as a personification to a phenomenon, but as the demonic spirit that it is. Most people will clearly change their minds about it if they had the same experience and live in denial that it was nothing but a dream, even though, in that case, it'll ease their mind. You see, once you encounter the Demon of Dusk, you'll have every right to claim it was a nightmare, because if you realized its truth, you'll most certainly never be the same again. This brings me back to quite a tragic story. The story of a close friend and a neighbor of mine. His name was Ethan. I remember him very well. Just 2 years ago back on a Sunday evening, I remember heading back to the neighborhood together. He had that cheerful, happy-go-lucky personality as we used to hang out every weekend. Ethan, you were such an amazing person. On that exact evening, I bid him farewell and left him with his usual smile. That was a smile he would never put on his face again for the rest of his life. The next morning, he didn't show up to school all day. It wasn't really that much of a surprise because we skipped school all the time. I couldn't ever visit him because his parents disliked me, for they deemed me as a bad influence on their child. It was all kind of regular, nothing to worry about up until now. But he skipped school the day after as well, and so on. He didn't answer his phone. He's never online on any social network, and he's nowhere to be seen. I became worried sick about him. I just had to know what is going on. So I waited until Friday when both his parents aren't home and visited him. But much to my surprise, both his parents were there. His dad had that creepy glare which he showed me every time he saw me, but it was somehow different than before. I sensed that he wasn't angry. He was sad. Then he spoke with a sorrowful tone. "Hello there. Good thing you came honestly. Ethan is in his room. If it's possible, please talk to him for a bit." The situation was awkward enough for me, and I just couldn't ask what's wrong. So without further hesitation, I went to his room. The door was open. I stepped inside and saw Ethan sitting on the floor. Dear God, the state he was in was indescribable. I greeted him, but he didn't reply, and he kept shivering from the moment I showed up. I felt like my presence won't help him through whatever he's going through. So I just went out with an optimistic faith that he probably just had too many mushrooms again. But that most certainly wasn't the cause for this. Anyway, I decided not to visit him for a while, at least until he recovers a bit. 1 week later, as I had been heading to school, I saw it. The large tent-like structure that holds funerals in my home country. The tradition is to construct it close to the deceased person's house and to keep it there for 3 days to welcome condolences. What shocked me was that it was constructed near Ethan's house. I ran to get there fast as my heart beat even faster. I asked the first person I met, shouting, "What the hell happened? Who died?" He then replied, informing me of Ethan's suicide. He slit his own throat. My God, Ethan, how come that you disappeared from our lives? These news almost made my heart stop. It had broken my soul. A dark cloud covered the neighborhood, propagating anguish and misery all over it. It was a great loss for everyone. I gave my condolences to Ethan's parents. His tearful dad told me to return tomorrow for a highly important subject. The following day, I went to see Ethan's dad, only to find that he gathered Ethan's clothes and overall possessions in a big cardboard box. He told me that since I had used to be a close friend of Ethan, that I should be the one to take them. This didn't look right one bit. Ethan was his child, and as his father, he must keep his possessions in order to remember him. But looking at that face, I realized he already can't forget the tragedy of his only son. He wants to take out anything that may remind him of that. So I accepted to keep them instead. He later informed me that his wife and him will move out of town, but that didn't surprise me. I took the cardboard box home. I found within it a photo album and nostalgically viewed it when something between the pages caught my eyes. It was a letter. It had a date, which was the day before the one I visited him at. I started reading it, and its contents brought me to tears. It was written as the following: "To anyone who is reading this, I'm writing this because I couldn't share what happened to me with anybody. Even though I wanted someone to look in my eyes and tell me it's all right, I couldn't bring myself to it. Oh God, I just couldn't. On Sunday night, that cursed night that will forever be kept inside my memory, I was sleeping normally, traveling to fantastic dream world. I can't recall what my dream was about. All I can remember that I was feeling really delighted, but then I fell into some kind of a pit, which woke me up. Upon waking up, I felt some kind of pressure on my body. I tried to stand up, but I failed to. I couldn't move a muscle. I couldn't do anything, neither move nor talk. I was clearly able to see the insides of my room, and was damn sure I'm not having a dream, so why? Why couldn't I move? I thought I'm having the thing my grandmother once told me about. The Demon of Dusk. According to the myth, she told me it'll only last for minutes, and the paralysis will perish. But what creeped me out was the fact she mentioned something about a demon being the one paralyzing you. But I knew such thing is impossible. I really wanted to believe that. But then I heard a sound coming from the corner of my room. Since my eyes were the only part of my body that wasn't paralyzed, I tried to force them to focus on the room's corner, and then I saw it. That sight terrified me to the fullest. The Jinn, the Demon of Dusk. The monstrous being sitting there with the most sinister smile on its hideous face. It noticed that I saw it and started crawling slowly until it reached me. I was dying from terror. I wanted to shout. I wanted to scream. I wanted to get off my bed and just run for it, but I couldn't. Then it sat on my body, and I could clearly see its grotesque image now. It wasn't very big. It resembled a troll or something, only it was uglier and scarier. It then strangled me with its hairy hands while keeping that smile. Oh my God, how terrible that felt. Then it started biting my torso and punching it. It got off my body for a couple of seconds to wander the room laughing, while I could only watch while I can't do anything to save myself. It came back to me again and started strangling me all over again. I just wanted to close my eyes. I forced them with all my might to get closed. Then the paralyzing feeling disappeared. I opened my eyes screaming as hardly as I can, waking up my parents in the process. The Demon of Dusk vanished as well. All what happened later doesn't matter anymore, and now that night refused to exit my mind. The same goes for the Demon of Dusk's damned face. I don't know what I became anymore. I'm afraid to sleep. I'm afraid of the dark. I'm afraid of solitude. I keep feeling its demonic presence near me all the time. It's like I'm losing my mind gradually. I know that I should get a grip of myself and be strong, but I cannot. The letter ends like that. Oh, Ethan, I should have been there for you when you needed me the most. I'm sorry, my dear friend. May your soul forgive my idiocy. It was hard for me, but I had to look more to what he was going through. I made a research on the Demon of Dusk, or how it is formally known, the sleep paralysis. As it seems, there are things that provoke it, but the way I see it, those were things that invite the Demon of Dusk to your bed. I have discovered that many people had the same experience as Ethan. Most of them saw it as well, the grotesque creature, the Demon of Dusk. All of them acknowledged within themselves that it was a dream. If only you had done the same, Ethan. Your fear took hold of you and swallowed you completely. It devoured you from the inside, to the point you gave up on your own life to end your suffering. Now I see that you thought it was more merciful. If only I had realized all of this sooner. May God have mercy on your soul. Many may disagree, but to me the Demon of Dusk is real. I used to be horrified by the fact I could end up its victim any night. And even though I got over it quite a long time ago, remembering the evil that took away my friend still haunts my mind. After all, unlike the common ghost stories and sightings, it is real. Now I know that all of this had horrified a lot of you people as well. All I can recommend is not to do anything that could invite it in. Do not get yourself into a nightmare you might not wake up from, as you may suffer the same fate as Ethan. This is all, my dear readers. Have a good night. Although, I know you probably won't. Whispers of Ridge Hollow. Coming from the Appalachian foothills of West Virginia, where driving town was a big to-do, I realized at a young age that people tend to lean toward the supernatural for things that they cannot understand. The women in my family were particularly guilty of this kind of superstition, the kind that only festers among neighbors and families deep in the hollers and bottoms of the mountains. My Aunt Margot was a self-proclaimed water witch. She would find a large forked branch of a specific kind of tree, I can't remember which kind, and walk out into people's fields and wooded properties until the end of the tree branch would suddenly gravitate toward the ground, indicating that there was a natural underground spring below her feet. My mom would claim that there were always more people in the house than she could see, but couldn't explain herself much further but to say, "I just feel them." My grandma used to speak of shadows in the corners of her eyes and keys that had been misplaced and replaced to their original spots, piles of small change on windowsills, and the smell of something burning during late summer nights when the stove and heat were off. My great-grandmother used to pour salt just inside the threshold of her front door before going to bed each night, and once when I watched her performing her bedtime ritual with what I could only assume to be absolute incredulity on my face, her only response was, "Just in case." I became contemptuous of this voodoo-like behavior, and in my mind I dubbed it mountain magic. Swinging wedding rings over pregnant bellies and bodily shivers indicating someone had just walked across my grave somewhere. It all seemed so silly to me. I am a very analytical person, and I could make sense of none of these tales, so I dismissed them. And yet, as I reflect on and discuss with loved ones outside of the women in my family the happenings of my life that have come to seem so normal to me, I realize that maybe the things that I have experienced aren't as normal as I once thought. My mom used to call me gifted, but not in the academically accelerated sense of the word. I was not really good at math or a quick reader. She used the term to describe what I've come to know through some quick Googling as a highly sensitive person, or HSP. HSPs, according to my research, are considered to be more prone to experiencing or causing paranormal activity because, through some atypical biological and psychological development, they are more in tune with the paranormal world. I also read that about 15 to 20% of people can be considered highly sensitive and that it is also hereditary. I can't say that I'm a firm believer yet, but I have experienced some things that I've been unable to explain, and my husband has encouraged me to write them down. So here's the first one I can remember. It's a little unrelated to mountain magic as I have defined it, but it was the first of many more experiences in my life, and I find that the beginning is usually the best place to start. My family lived in New Jersey. My dad was in the Army and was stationed at Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, which is no longer in existence, I don't think. We lived on Goslin Avenue, a picture of a street, really. Looking back, it reminds me of Maycomb in To Kill a Mockingbird. I was very young when we lived there. I attended kindergarten through second grade and was extremely extroverted. One afternoon after school, a bunch of us went over to my friend Lena's house, which was about 3 or 4 houses down from mine. Earlier that day, Lena had informed us that she had a miniature pool table in her basement, so we all decided that's where we'd be spending that afternoon. I was the first to arrive and had never been inside her house before. Upon entry, I immediately knew why. Lena lived with her dad, who, to me, seemed a million years old. It was dark and cramped in her house, and exceptionally warm, with a huge, glowing fish tank in the living room filled with giant tropical fish crammed in, swimming all over each other. And the entire house smelled like that fish tank. As we walked through the living room to the kitchen, her face turned a slight shade of red, embarrassed, and I quickly removed whatever dumbstruck look I had to avoid any awkwardness. After the group all showed up, we made our way down the stairs and into the basement. We saw the pool table in the middle of the floor and quickly took up residence in the patio chairs, boxes, washer and dryer, any place that we could find a seat, and claimed our spots for seatbacks. After growing bored of miniature pool and having caught up on all the things that happened at school that day, we eventually ran out of steam and became restless. The only solution at that point, as was logical to us in our childish minds, was to play truth or dare. I remember actively avoiding eye contact and communication with the group at that point because I absolutely loathed that game. Why would I want to subject myself to discomfort just because someone else said I had to? The premise was dumb, and the kids that thrived on it were dumb too, at least in my mind. So after a few rounds of truth or dare and a good 30 minutes of silence on my part, I was unamused and restless, trying to think of an excuse to go home. My mom hadn't called, dinner wasn't ready, my brother was at his friend's house. I was out of ideas. So I sat there discontent for a few more minutes, and again the conversation died down and we began to pick at our fingernails. The room went silent. Something caught my eye. My head shot up just in time to see one girl in our group directly across from me. On the other side of the room and long side of the pool table, frozen in fear, her eyes wide in disbelief as she stared at what I thought was right at me. I started to say something, I don't know what, probably mocking the look on her face because that was my MO at the time. But my own voice caught in my throat as the atmosphere quickly changed from lighthearted to confused. I glanced around at everyone else to see them all staring at the green felt of the mini pool table. I followed suit, wondering why everyone became so solemn so quickly. A ball on the table had begun to spin in place. I don't know if this has any significance or not, but I can still remember what number it was. 9 with a yellow stripe. We all sat in icy silence, unable to move. I, at least, was unable to breathe. I can still remember the cold aluminum of the lawn chair I was sitting in against my thigh, slight condensation from my own sweat gathering and becoming slick. After what seemed like only a few seconds, the ball began to roll. It rolled from my side of the table, away from me and towards my friend. Slowly at first, almost like it was a struggle. And then it picked up more and more momentum. And as it rolled to the other side of the table, the balls in its path would move themselves out of the way and into the pockets on the sides. When the 9 reached the far side of the table, it stopped abruptly, just short of the ledge. By that point, all the other balls had moved into the pockets, and all of our eyes were fixated on the last remaining ball. It paused for a long moment, and I let out a nervous sigh. I hadn't realized I had been holding my breath and immediately felt a little silly. But almost as if someone had flipped an off/on switch, the ball reanimated. Only this time, it moved straight up. It was almost as if someone had wrapped a piece of fishing line around the ball that I couldn't see and was reeling it up from some secret hole in the upstairs floor. But we had all played at least one round on that table, and a string would have been quickly discovered during gameplay. I watched the ball slowly gain height until it was at eye level with my friend across the room. It then moved directly toward her face, still very slowly, with what seemed to be calculated intention. It crossed over the edge of the pool table, traveled another 6 inches or so in the air toward my friend, paused, and then just dropped to the ground with a light crack and rolled away under some shelves by the cellar. The air changed cool but chokingly humid, and I suddenly had a very metallic taste in my mouth. And without a word, I walked as fast as I could to the stairs, through that cramped, fishy living room, and back into outdoors. I didn't stop, but I didn't run. I walked with a purpose straight from that basement, through my front door, and onto the couch where my mom was sitting watching TV. I didn't say a word. I went over it, and over it again in my mind, trying with all my 8-year-old might to make sense of it. I wasn't able to say a word about it for a lot of years because I wasn't quite sure of what I had actually seen. It wasn't until I was 13 and we had moved back to West Virginia to be with family that I told my mom about it. We were sitting around the kitchen table with my Aunt Margot and Grandma peeling potatoes, and not one of them laughed. She then told me of the history of that street and of the field behind it, Greeley Field, and of her own ghost stories at Fort Monmouth, which I may put on paper at a later date. Each woman took her turn explaining to me the first time they realized they were sensitive, and they congratulated me on inheriting their special gift. My Aunt Margot offhandedly suggested that it could have been my disdain for the current game of truth or dare that could have even sparked it, similar to a psychokinetic poltergeist type of event. But even now, at the age of 28, I still dream of that event and often think of my aunt's explanation. The precision of the balls on that table falling straight into the pockets. I can still hear the muted thunks of each one. The slow and deliberate movement of the 9-ball as it moved first laterally and then through the third dimension into midair. But mostly it's the thick air of that basement and the metallic taste in my mouth. The thought that it could have been me all along that haunts me. The woman in the shaft. My father was a military man, retired back in '95 from the Navy after 20 years of proud service to our country. But before that, we moved often. Every 3 to 4 years or thereabouts, we'd pack up and get shipped somewhere new. Early 1989, a wonderful opportunity arose, and Dad took it. A 16-hour flight later, and we were stationed at Enya Sigonella, Sicily. I guess I was about 10 or 11 at the time. Those years were blurred, save those pinpricks of memory that still haunt me, that still plague my dreams from time to time. Our first home, there was an apartment in a complex called Bella Vista, far from the naval base. There was a waiting list to move into base housing that generally ran for about a year and a half's wait. Until your time to move, you had to live amongst the locals wherever you could. Bella Vista was a beautiful place. We lived on the upper floor of the complex and had a wonderful view of the countryside off our back balcony. At night, one could look up at the night sky and see a thin trail of fiery red lava slowly ebbing from still active empty Etna. And in the morning, everything left out in the open was often found to be blanketed ever so slightly in volcanic ash, almost like a light dusting of snow. But naturally, as perfectly nice as Bella Vista was, it wasn't meant for us for long. The landlord's daughter was pregnant, engaged, and homeless. Guess who got the boot? So we moved, with the landlord's assistance, into another home. Mata S. Anastasia, a little cobblestone street town near Catania and much closer to the Navy base. The day we drove up to the new place, I felt ill. Of course, nothing was thought of this at the time, but I'd swear in retrospect I was being told something. The place was a 3-story house with an apartment on each floor. I really don't remember the neighbors, but both were similarly Navy families. And I can imagine I pissed them off a lot with the screaming. Dad unlocked the door and proceeded into the small entryway. The cobblestone street gave way to a marbled floor entrance, and a matching set of marble stairs up to the second floor, which was our new home. The place was stunningly beautiful. Marble floors, glass French doors into the living room area, balconies attached to nearly every room, save the one that was to be mine. Clawfoot bathtub, bidet, all the modern conveniences expected of a home in Europe. I walked into the room that was going to be mine. Small, simple, square, and quite cold. To the left, at the end of the wall, was a door covered with a persiana. Basically, a form of window blinds made from heavy horizontal flaps that was operated via a cloth strap attached to the wall. I pulled it up to see that the door was mostly glass, and beyond it was a very small room, lined with brick along the floor and walls. I opened the door and stepped into the room and looked up, to discover the room extended all the way up through the 3rd floor and up to a hole in the roof. There was no covering on the hole either. It went straight into open air. The shaft allowed a fair amount of light to shine into the only room in the house without a window in it, which I thought was pretty damn cool initially. The chill seemed to come from the room, despite the glaring sun nearly directly overhead. It was then I heard the first whispers, like if you were to take a wire brush and softly rub the stiff bristles against your jeans. At the time, I attributed it to echoes off the brick, but I couldn't help but feel weird about it. It wasn't coming from any discernible direction or source. but it surrounded me like a blanket, as if sound could be tangible and touchable. It pressed in gently on my ears, like pressure on an aircraft ascending or descending. I turned to leave, and I noticed a glinting drain in the middle of the floor. It was obviously for rainwater to drain away, but my nausea increased when I saw it. My stomach gnawed at itself as I ran out of there, and I swear I saw the drain-covered jiggle a bit on my way out. I lowered the Persiana quickly and rejoined the family in the living room, shaking and sick as a dog. Now, granted, a little brick room was far from the norm for paranormal ghosty stuff, but try telling that to whatever was in there. Christ, for weeks and weeks, I'd get up the nerve to open the Persiana in broad daylight and risk a peek, only to stumble back from the door sick as all hell to my stomach and trembling. I tried telling my parents, of course, but an 11-year-old's ramblings about a scary brick room generally get chalked up to too many Freddy and Jason movies. The whisperings rarely stopped at night. They were persistent from the time I lay down until I finally forced myself into slumber. Often, I'd wake up in the middle of the night to silence, and then the whisperings would start up again, as if it was waiting to make sure I was awake. There was never any real words to the whispering, just a hollow "ksssate sha hishaha ush hashe" that seemed to repeat, but never in the same cadence. There was no emotion behind it either that I can remember. It wasn't angry, it wasn't sad nor happy. Just there, always fucking there. One night, after about 2 months of this, I was awoken by a particularly horrifying dream. I seemed to start having those dreams after we moved in. I had never had constant nightmares prior, but I awoke from the dream with the feeling that something was terribly, terribly wrong. Immediately, my eyes darted to the door and saw that the Persiana was up. Now, European goons with experience, back me up. Persianas are about the noisiest damn things to have in a house. They're generally metal slats hooked in with metal hooks that grind and squeak loudly in protest as they're pulled open. There was no way in hell that the Persiana, which was always closed, could have been opened without waking up everyone in the house. But sure enough, it was open about 3/4 of the way up the damn door. A bit of moonlight reflected off the bricks in the shaft and into my room with a dull bluish tone. I lay there for hours, paralyzed in my bed, but unable to look away from the door, lest there be something there when I looked back. Eventually, I just conked out. The next morning crept up finally, and I was freed from my paralysis. I ran to the door amidst a wave of nausea and pulled the Persiana shut as fast as I could. There was a light dusting of volcanic ash on the brick floor, and I'd swear I could make out footprints or scuffing in it. Mom, still asleep at the time, yelled at me from across the hall after hearing the noise, but I couldn't care less. Over the course of the next 3 months, it was the same routine. The whisperings never faltered. The Persiana would be found at least 2 to 3 times a week opened, and the blackness of the room would stare out at me in my bed. Then one night, it was different. I still have nightmares of this incident, and it makes me cringe and want to curl up in a ball still whenever I conjure it up. I had awoken again in the midst of a terrible nightmare, and sure enough, the Persiana was up, but this time it was all the way up. The moonlight was barely filtering in that night, but I'd swear I could make out something there in the room. It felt like I was at just the right angle for me to see whatever it was, and if I were to move the slightest bit, I'd lose sight of it. It was a small sphere that shimmered like a soap bubble does, but it was so faint I could barely make it out. I watched as it hovered there for the longest time. It began to shrink like some TVs used to do when you turn them off. Shrink into a tiny dot of light. But before it winked out, it flashed and expanded. It did so at an alarmingly fast rate and solidified into the form of a woman. She looked to be in her early to mid-30s, dark curly hair, definitely a local Sicilian. When she became whole and a solid image, she began shrieking and pounding on the glass doors with both fists. Her head swiveled wrong on her neck, shaking back and forth like if you put a tea kettle on a stick and shook the stick around. Her eyes were completely black and full of anger and hatred. The skin around her mouth flapped loosely, giving me glimpses of her teeth and tongue. And her hair was tossing around violently. Some sort of liquid oozed in small spurts from the corners of her mouth, and flecks of whatever it was flew as she shrieked. Her screaming was horrific and nonsensical, and all I could do was scream back. My dad charged into the room to my bed, thinking I was having a nightmare. She shrank back from the door, and ugh. She slithered down the drain somehow. She twisted and distorted, and I'd swear I could hear her bones splintering and cracking as she wound herself down into it. It was awful. And to this day, Dad says he's never heard anyone scream so inhumanly before. I often ask him jokingly if he meant for me or her. The Phantom of Silverstream Bridge. To begin with, I am Ravi Malhotra, living in Mumbai, India. I have newly joined as a consultant in Capgemini. I'm kind of an atheist and don't believe in any supernatural. But these past few days, there have been some incidents which have shaken my belief, if not shattered it completely. And when I'm sharing this on creepypasta, I am not putting a story, but a portion of my life to have the answers which have eluded me. As I believe on this forum, there are many people who have faced similar situations in their lives and can really help me out. Now I would like to share the incidents, or rather, some creepy incidents which occurred with me in these past few days. I live alone in a one-room kitchen apartment in a suburban area of New Mumbai, known as Kopercairn, this area being very far from my office. So we use the transport facility provided by the organization for our smooth travel. It's nearly an hour journey, which goes from crowded city roads to a long stretch of expressway to my organization. On the stretch to expressway, there is a 200 to 300 meter long bridge, which is over a small stream of water that comes from the gulf between Mumbai and New Mumbai. This bridge ends with a toll booth and then the Western Express Highway. We have our working hours fixed at 9.5 hours every day. Failing to complete, it means a negative point against you in annual grading or appraisal, as we call it. This incident is from some 2 weeks back on a Tuesday. I returned from a week holiday and I had a lot of work. Normally, I leave the office at around 9:45, but that day I stayed back to complete my backlogs. Around 10 o'clock, I was finished with most of my work. So out of boredom, I decided to go to a nearby mall, our city, for dinner, thinking that I would be able to return for the next bus, which is at 10:45. But unfortunately, I was able to return around 10:50, and I could see the bus leaving in front of my eyes. I inquired and got to know that there is still a bus left, which is at 11:15. I went inside to find that the bus was already there and boarded it. The bus took off at sharp 11:15. I was the only traveler. The other person was the driver. There was a cool night breeze, and I felt sleepy after a long day of work, so I dozed off. It was at around the toll booth when I got up. I looked at my watch, which told me it was around 11:40. I rubbed my eyes and leaned my head outside the window to have the awesome view of the area from the bridge, with the town lights on one end and shining water from moonlight below. As we reached the middle of the bridge, I saw a laborer standing near a light post. I could see that he was completely drenched. As we were closing on him, I could feel that the area was rather cold, maybe because of the water body below. I felt sorry for the laborer to work in those harsh conditions. As the bus was passing him, and he was just parallel to me, he suddenly took his head up and looked at the bus. I felt something strange about him. As his eyes met mine, I can swear that I felt goose flesh going through my body. His face looked so devoid of expressions, almost lifeless. I took my eyes down, feeling sorry for him. As the bus crossed some distance, I turned my head back to see him, but there was no one standing there. I mean, I could very well see the whole portion of the bridge from that point, but he was not there. At that moment, I knew that this was something different. I inquired to the driver, and he reacted as if it's a regular affair. He said in almost a dismissive tone that it was one of the ghosts which people sometimes see on this bridge. For the first time in my life, I had my heart in my mouth. He further told me that it is believed that some laborers died during the construction of this bridge when an iron beam fell on them while working below it during the monsoon season. Some of them fell into the raging stream, and their bodies were never found. The incident was hushed up, but since then some people have reported sightings of these laborers, including the contractor who owned the contract of construction of that bridge. It is said that he was so terrified that he never returned back to the site, even for the ceremony when the bridge went operational. That night, I had terrible nightmares all night long. Now, this incident is of this Wednesday. I was asked to sit late that day by my manager, as UAT, user acceptance testing, is going on, and unfortunately, I had to stay that day also till 11:15. I boarded the bus, but my heart was already pouncing. I saw one more traveler with me, which was kind of a relief. There was a heavy rainfall, as this being the monsoon season in India. I had kept in my mind that I will not look outside my window during that stretch of journey. At around 11:50, we were at the toll booth. I was on the second seat. The other person was on the first seat, and he was sleeping, in fact, snoring. The driver stopped the bus after just crossing the toll booth. I asked him why he had stopped the bus. He told me that he has to renew his monthly pass for this toll booth. I insisted that he should do it next day, but he told me that at this time, there is no rush. And next day, he has an afternoon shift, when it will be heavily crowded. He took off from the driver gate. The bridge was just 5 to 6 meters from where the bus was standing, and it was still raining cats and dogs. I closed my window as well as my eyes, while I put on my earplugs listening to Terry Gallion, a new hit song from a Bollywood movie, to distract myself. It was not even a minute when I felt that somebody was knocking. I pulled out my earplugs and saw a person standing below my window with his hand out begging. I never wanted to open my window because in the back of my mind, I knew he could be a ghost. But somehow, I couldn't stop myself from opening it. He was just staring at me with his hand out. I took a 10-rupee note and said, "Take it quick, or the note will get wet." But he didn't take it. At the same moment, I was shook by the other person from the first seat. He asked me who I was talking to, and when I turned back, there was no one. I told him what I saw. He was scared too. The driver returned, and I told him what had happened. This time, he replied with a serious look, and he said that he was not asking for money, but he was asking my hand, but he didn't tell me what he meant. I asked him many times, but he never told me the meaning of his statement. Now I am frightened, as I have no idea what it means. Does this have happened to anyone else too? On that bridge? I am now frightened enough, even when the bus crosses that place in daylight. If anybody has any experience or suggestions what this meant, then I will be very grateful.
And that was tonight's tale from the Shadowed Tales archive. If it left a mark on your mind, if the silence feels heavier now, then the story did what it was meant to do. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the darkness. New stories are always on their way. Until then, keep the lights low and the doors locked.